couple of months ago, I went over the Jaguar GT2 project, which, to cut a long story short, was a shambles of epic proportions. I had a soft spot for the car because it was an underdog amongst its competitors, and it also looked fantastic in my opinion. It also seemed to resonate with loads of people who watched said video, particularly how it featured in certain racing games, including Forza Motorsport 4, which I completely forgot about, which in turn is somewhat embarrassing for me as that is my favourite Forza game. In the real world though, it was basically a cataclysmic failure. What also didn't help was that Jaguar as a brand has a huge amount of history in motorsport, particularly in endurance racing, making this effort all the more deflating for fans of the British marque. The project ended before the 2012 American Le Mans Series season even turned a wheel. However, unintentionally, another new car from a UK-based manufacturer would take a punt on competing at the top level of Grand Touring racing in America. Lotus as a brand has arguably even greater history than Jaguar when it comes to racing. It's had 489 starts in Formula 1, which yielded 6 Drivers' Championships and 7 Constructors' Championships. Its performances did start to wane somewhat in its later years, however that doesn't detract from this manufacturer's achievements. But it also has a legacy in endurance racing. The Elite model has had class victories at Le Mans and has also competed for overall wins with its iconic 11 model in the mid-1950s. So this brand has had success across the motorsport landscape. Perhaps this history gives further incentive to want to return to top-level motor racing. And when it comes to top-level racing, competing against several different manufacturers in the GT2/GTE class of sports car racing isn't a bad way at trying to get some attention. Duking it out with the likes of Ferrari, Porsche, BMW and Corvette etc., Lotus would be entering the 2011 Intercontinental Le Mans Cup, which included the 24 Hours of Le Mans. The base car they would be using to create their souped-up Grand Tourer would be the Evora. And whilst this car was Lotus's higher-end model, with there being a few more luxury-based items than you'd get on an Elise or Exige, its nimbleness was seen as a key advantage over all of its rivals. The car would be designed by Nicola Schimecka, who had had recent experience with designing top-level GT race cars with the beautiful yet thunderous Maserati MC12. But that being said, like pretty much every other GT manufacturer effort, you need to partner up with a top-quality race team that can get the most out of your car during the season and be in control of the preparation and setup of a race weekend. For the Lotus team, they'd be partnering up with Austrian-based Jet Alliance Racing. Now, you'd be forgiven for not knowing who this team was. However, prior to being the operation picked to run the 2 Lotus 4 GTEs in the Intercontinental Le Mans Cup, the Jet Alliance squad was a privateer effort in the FIA GT series, running Aston Martin DBR9s. They ran pretty well in the series, collecting a couple of victories along the way, and the team also entered the car into the 2009 Le Mans 24 Hours, which was a DBR9 in the GT1 class. Instead of being a privateer though, they'd be the ones tasked with getting the most out of the Evora. The team's chief executive, Lukas Lichtner-Hoyer, said of the announcement, "Some people have asked why we would take a risk working with new cars. My answer on this subject always remains the same. We believe in Lotus, and we believe that in uniting with them, we'll create something very exciting, very special, and most of all, very successful." Meanwhile, the then director of motorsport for Lotus, Claudio Berro, said, "Moving into the ILMC is an exciting step for us, and it will provide a good opportunity to showcase what can be done with the Evora. The Jet Alliance racing team has a lot of experience and a respected pedigree in this field, so we're delighted that they have agreed to work with us on what is bound to be an incredible challenge. We're looking forward to seeing what ILMC 2011 brings." So let's take a look at the statistics of this thing. It would be utilising a 4-litre Toyota-derived V6 mid-mounted engine, which in turn would be fettled by Cosworth and develop 470 brake horsepower, all going to the rear Yokohama wheels through a 6-speed sequential gearbox made by X-Track. The car underwent testing on the most part at Lotus's test track in Hethel, Norfolk, along with Snetterton. However, the team would also take part in the official Le Mans test day. Describing the car and the test, Lichtner-Hoyer said, "Technologically and visually a corker, Lotus has really done a super job. The test day was very positive. We've been running both race cars and they hold the track well. In the end, we were trailing the front runners by just under 9 seconds. The car has the potential to be a winner." Meanwhile, the team's manager, Jan Kalmer, said, "The test day at Le Mans was much more pleasant than we all could have expected. This makes me very confident for the future of our project. Like I said earlier, the team would enter 2 Avoras in the LMGTE Pro category, although one of the lineups would consist of what was basically an all-amateur driver roster. They don't outline the reasons why, although potentially this could be to do with testing out how the Lotus would get on in the hands of amateur drivers for privateer and customer teams wanting to use the Avora in future seasons. Not a bad idea per se, although it wouldn't be the most competitive entry in that class, I would imagine. Plus, they wouldn't be able to enter the LMGTE AM category with that entry because the car is brand new, and the rules for that class state that the car must be at least a year old. Car 64 would be piloted across the season by Martin Rich, Oscar Slingerland, John Hartshorn, David Heinemeier Hansen, Kasper Jensen, René Rasmussen, and Lucas Littner Hoyer, the team's chief executive. Car 65 though did have a more pro-orientated lineup. James Rossiter, a former F1 test driver for Honda and Super Aguri, Jonathan Hershey, who'd competed in the 2010 Le Mans 24 Hours in a GT1 Ford GT, and Johnny Molam, a driver with huge experience in sports car racing and someone who would be helping develop the Avora, particularly in the aero configurations. He'd also be working with Cosworth to try and get the most out of the 4-litre V6 engine. So now let's see how the team got on in its ILMC campaign. After skipping Sebring, the team would enter the second round at the legendary Spa circuit. Qualifying didn't go brilliantly. Car 64 didn't set a time, and Car 65 set a time that was around 4.5 seconds off the fastest LMGTE lap. As for the race, well, they were still working out a few gremlins, particularly on the Rossiter Molam Hershey entry, which didn't finish. The 64 car finished 25 laps down on the LMGTE Pro winner. That though was the precursor to the big one at Le Mans. Expectations? Well, Lucas had this to say. In comparison with the competition, we've still had far too few kilometres with the cars, but I'm in good spirits nevertheless, especially since both cars will yet complete a 24-hour test in Hethel beforehand. In essence, a great emphasis on keeping expectations in check. For good reason as well. The car had so many updates heading into Le Mans that the team weren't able to run an endurance test before Le Mans, which according to Jan Kalmer was unheard of in motor racing. Qualifying didn't go brilliantly. On the test day, the team were trailing the front runners by just under 9 seconds. So with the improvements being made since then, let's see how much closer they were. Okay, let's just brush that under the carpet and jump straight into the race. That year's edition of the Le Mans 24 Hours was plagued by several monstrous accidents, which meant that by modern standards the rate of attrition was rather high, and the Jet Alliance Avoras were not immune from problems. The 64 car in the hands of Rich, Slingerland and Hartshorn suffered a puncture around 7 hours and 20 minutes into the race. Then at around 3 AM, the same car had another accident off camera, which damaged the Avora so badly that it couldn't get back to the pits on its own power, and the car was declared out. The 65 entry though was very much better, not setting amazingly quick times, but kept on pounding round without issues, and it did this for the whole race, with the exception of some debris which damaged the rear undertray, causing an awful vibration, thus leading that part to be replaced, as well as 2 slow punctures, which was only discovered when the car was brought back out after the rear undertray had been replaced. Rossiter, Molam and Hershey would get to the finish in 22nd overall, 7th in LMGTE Pro, 19 laps down, but did take a podium in that class of the cars that were registered for the Intercontinental Le Mans Cup. Lucas said, "Congratulations to the entire team. They have done an outstanding job over the past few weeks, thus really making this great appearance possible for us. Because bringing a brand new car that far in such a short space of time to be able to make it to the finish of the world's toughest endurance race is really worth to be cherished." In light of the achievement at Le Mans and in the expectations for the subsequent round at Imola, Jan Kalmer said, "We brought one Avora home at Le Mans. In Imola, I want to see both cars cross the finishing line." Well, that didn't happen. Having in one case lasted 24 hours without any mechanical gremlins whatsoever, neither car would get beyond the hour mark without engine issues in the 6-hour race at Imola. Even though this was seen as a development year for the Avora, and with scenarios like this apparently even being prepared for by the team so that they could best deal with them if these things ever cropped up, This was a fall from grace from what seemed like good progress being made at Le Mans. For Silverstone there'd be a few changes, 9 new performance updates to the car, and a driver replacement for Jonathan Hershey, in the form of former Austrian F1 driver Karl Wendlinger. Karl though wasn't entering a foreign team as he'd raced for Jet Alliance in the FIA GT1 days, driving the Aston Martin DBR9. However, did the updates make a difference performance-wise? The answer was a positive one, of sorts. The car was 3.5 seconds off the fastest LMGTE Pro time, which was a fair improvement over the previous qualifying performance. In the race though, the speed to its rivals was still lacking. The 65 car finished 7 laps down than the class winner, whilst the 64 car wasn't classified. However, the performance at the Petit Le Mans was even less promising. In fact, both Lotuses in qualifying were slower than the Jaguars. Admittedly, this race would prove to be the last for Jaguar, and the car had already had 2 years of racing under its belt at that point, but even so. They did though finish better in the race than the Jaguars did, but not by much. For the final 2 rounds, David Heinemeier Hansen would take up the 3rd seat alongside Johnny Molam and James Rossiter. However, both cars would end up not being classified, and in the case of the 64, would DNF through crash damage in an off-camera shunt at the treacherous final corner. In the final race at Zhuhai in China, the cars would qualify at the back of the field and would suffer a multitude of issues in the incredibly hot race. Among the issues according to Jan Kalmer were the gearbox, a tyre failure, 2 off-track excursions, and hostile contact with a competitor. I wish I could elaborate on what the hostile contact was, and indeed what hostile contact actually is. There were some silver linings though. Both cars did get to the finish line, albeit one wasn't officially classified, but perhaps most impressively, James Rossiter set the fastest lap time in the LMGT Pro field in a free practice session. Now the session did take place in wet conditions, and of course it is only a practice session. The other teams may not have been pushing that hard. However, it did demonstrate that the Evora did handle beautifully. Its biggest Achilles heel was its lack of straight line speed. The thing is though, Jet Alliance Racing would no longer be managing the programme, as Lotus and the team couldn't come to an agreement on running the cars in Europe. That though didn't spell the end for the Evora GTE. Across the pond stateside, the Lotus would be run in the American Le Mans series by Alex Yob Racing. According to the press release, it seemed as though it was the team that was keen on getting Evora to race. The team principal of Alex Yob Racing, Alex Yob, now why does that not surprise me, said, "Our efforts and ability to attract Lotus is a testament to the hard work that AJR has put in over the past several years. The team's drivers would be Bill Sweedler, and then regular IndyCar driver, as well as current commentating extraordinaire, Townsend Bell. Having the chance to represent such a great brand like Lotus is simply awesome. I'm really fired up to work with Alex, Bill and my good friend Colin Dine from William Rast in what will undoubtedly be a great adventure. Time to buckle up." Then American Le Mans Series CEO and President Scott Atherton said, "It's a pleasure to welcome the Lotus brand and their spectacular Evora to the most competitive GT class of racing in the world." The team though had demonstrated in its recent past that it could put together a competitive programme, winning GT classes at Le Mans and the Sebring 12 Hours. The team at one time was a factory-backed Porsche entry in the ALMS. This was more than a competent outfit that Lotus would be partnering up with. Just like the Jet Alliance effort though, Alex Yob Racing's Lotus would not make the first round at Sebring, mainly because the car hadn't been delivered yet. So the car's first round would be in Long Beach, because obviously that's the best place to guarantee a smooth and damage-free weekend to help get to grips with a new car. Sadly, damage-free is not how the car would escape out of the Long Beach event. On the first lap no less, a bottleneck caused Bill Sweedler to slow down to a crawl, which some of the cars behind didn't slow as much for. The car was then spun round on the entrance to the fountain, and as the car was doing a Scandinavian flick back in the right direction, it was hit even harder up the rear end by an LMP2 car. That then caused the exhaust pipe to be pointing at a 90-degree angle, which in turn decreased the amount of usable power that the car had at its disposal by around 90%. The car would be repaired, however it would end up 27 laps down of the GT class winner. Still, the team gained valuable data, and in Townsend's case, I got to ride around the streets of Long Beach in a fast Lotus today, so that wasn't all bad. Never change, Townsend. Never change. Please. The next round would be one of the series' longer events, the Laguna Seca 6 Hours. The weekend didn't start off brilliantly as the engine developed an issue early into the event, meaning they'd gone back to the engine used in Long Beach, which was a 2011 spec engine. But things would get even worse in the race. Barely 30 minutes into its duration and the Lotus developed a gearbox issue, which put it out of contention, and later on, out of the race entirely. Onto Lime Rock Park, which in theory is the track on the schedule where the Evora should excel at the most. Not many long straights, and loads of cornering to have to contend with, so the car's lack of straight line speed won't be so much of a hindrance here. In qualifying, the car was 1.5 seconds off the leading GT time, by far and away the closest the car had been in qualifying trim to its competitors. In the race though, the car would end up finishing 4 laps down, although the car didn't suffer any mechanical gremlins during the 2 hours 45 minute duration. On to Mossport now, which is a circuit that very much uncovers any straight line speed deficiencies that your car may suffer from. So perhaps unsurprisingly, the Evora was further behind in qualifying compared to its rivals. It was over 3 seconds off the pace. Race-wise, it still finished a couple of laps down to the GT winner, but did still put up a bit more of a fight, so to speak, than perhaps you'd have expected. Although it did lose a piece of trim with around an hour remaining. At Mid-Ohio, the car was still around 3 seconds off in qualifying, even behind one of the new Dodge SRT Vipers, which was making its race debut that weekend. In the race, the Lotus and Vipers were involved in a titanic battle for a top 10 GT class finish, which with a few minutes left seemed like it was going to be taken by the Lotus, until it pulled over with an issue. The Road America 4 Hours was a welcome quiet weekend for the team. In qualifying, considering the track was one of the fastest and longest on the schedule, to be around 2.5 seconds off GT pole was a decent result. In the race, they stayed out of trouble, ran as high as 4th place in GT, and the Evora GTE finished on the lead lap and 7th in class. Possibly the team's and car's most competent event yet of the season. Good thing the following event was in the motorsport lottery known as Baltimore. In qualifying though, they were further off the pace than you may have anticipated, over 3.5 seconds off the GT pole time. However, it was the race where the issues would lie. It took place in hot and humid conditions, which impacted the Lotus substantially, with the tyres and engine overheating profusely. They would end up finishing a lap down and 10th in the GT category. The Virginia 4 Hours was next up. Just under 3 seconds off in qualifying, the race went by without too many issues. Bell did have a spin-off camera towards the end of the race, and the overall pace wasn't brilliant, but they did achieve the best result of the campaign so far, with a 6th place finish. Whether this would be a confidence booster going into the final round of the season at the Petit Le Mans, I have absolutely no idea. Despite that though, Bell and Sweedler would be joined by a 3rd driver. It would be a welcome return to the Evora GTE for Johnny Molan, who said in anticipation, "I'm optimistic that with the great preparation of AJR behind it, and the advantage of a 10-hour race where reliability and strategy can really play a part, that we have a chance at a strong performance in the final results." In qualifying, the car would still be in and around 3 seconds off the GT class pole time. Unfortunately, in the early stages of the race, the car suffered a rear right lower control arm failure, that's a mouthful and a half, after contact with a Porsche, and went off in another incident with a Porsche later on, which would collectively assist in the Evora finishing the race in 11th place, 15 laps down, to the GT category winner. Apart from that though, the car ran the whole race without any other mechanical gremlins. Alex Yob said of the result, and indeed of the whole season, "The car ran great the rest of the race, and went all 10 hours today. That is a testament to the development work we've done for the car, and a motivator for next year." So without wishing to go on any further as this video is long enough already, let's skip to 2013. The iconic Sebring 12 Hours would begin the season for Alex Yob Racing, who would be partnering up with West Racing for the GT season in their Lotus. No wait, hold on a second, that's a 458 Italia. Yes, the team had jumped ship from the Italian-built machine for a company based in Norfolk, and into a new ship which was also Italian-built, but this time for an Italian brand. The difference though is that the 458 Italia had already demonstrated itself as being a competitive car. In the statement announcing the 2013 ALMS entry, it didn't mention anything to do with Lotus. However, the programme that was meant to last 2 years would end just after 1. Townsend said in the statement, "I can't wait for turn 1 at Sebring in the new ride. Time to buckle up." Now, where have I heard that phrase before? From that point, the Evora GTE project had reached its conclusion. A sad end to what had been a car that had a couple of bright moments that turned out to be false dawns, as the 2 development seasons that globetrotted around 3 different continents yielded no breakthroughs or consistent signs of progress. However, to be honest, it's perhaps not too surprising that the car didn't perform all that well when you take into account a couple of factors. Seemingly, the engine was either not developed enough to be competitive with the opposition, or was simply never going to be powerful enough to compete, but perhaps the biggest catch was the short time frame in which this was built before it went into a racing environment. Lichtner Hoyer from the Jet Alliance squad said after the team's result in the car's first race at Spa, "When you consider that the Lotus Evora GTE has been completely newly developed and built in record time, I'm not dissatisfied. It's very rare that projects which take a short period of time to go from concept to reality pay off, no matter how prepared a team might be, and indeed the skills of the personnel you have at your disposal. Take the 1997 F1 Lola as an example. Had this project have maybe taken a year or 2 further to develop off the track, with a longer period of time to construct the thing so that all the details of the Evora could have been thought of, without having to constantly ponder about an upcoming deadline to get the finished project, well, finished, it may have performed better. I'm not saying that the people who made the car didn't care about it or didn't put any effort into it, but like I say, projects that are done quickly don't often tend to work out too well. Other than being a wonderful looking car, it's a hugely forgotten part of the iconic Lotus brand's racing history. That though is going to be it for this very lengthy video. Thank you very much for watching. Just a few quick notes I feel I'd ought to mention. Firstly, whilst I'm enormously appreciative of all the comments I've had on my videos, I simply won't be able to respond to as many comments as I have been recently. I've tried to reply to as many as I could, as I want to try and have as much viewer engagement with the channel as possible. However, that takes time, and it's been affecting how many videos I'm able to post over a certain period of time, and I feel as though you'd rather see more videos than me respond to your comments. I hope you understand why I'm doing this. However, I will still be reading the comments though, so feel free to comment down below about your thoughts on this programme. Finally, whilst I don't like doing any plugs about my channel, I will say that seeing as this has taken a rather long time to make, I would be immensely grateful if you did like this video, and in turn, subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video. With all that being said though, thank you ever so much for watching, and until the next video, be kind to each other, and enjoy the rest of your day.